In this game, I am the destined one, the second coming of Wukong, ready to take his own journey to the west. And if I run more than 10 feet, I get winded and need to take a breather for about 4 seconds. Or I'm Khazan, the mightiest general. Even before being possessed by the Blade Demon, he had slain the Berserk Dragon Hismar, sword and axe in hand, and I highly doubt he did that when he can't dodge 4 times in a row without needing a nap. Now, I actually really enjoyed both of these games, but I want to talk about a system that I keep seeing pop up that I really don't understand the point, because stamina itself isn't a problem. Like, I'm not saying that. The problem that I have with it is, in both of these games specifically, they play much more like action games. You are this main character, the boss fights are extremely intense and flashy compared to almost any Souls-like boss. But despite that, they added this little bar at the top. And I just don't get why, because as you go further into the game, it feels like your stamina bar becomes more or less obsolete, unless you sprint for too long and forget to let it recharge before you fight. Both of these games offer various perks, abilities, items, whatever, that make stamina management a complete non-issue. So I don't understand why it's there in the first place, other than to make the beginning of the game more of a slog than it needs to be. Now, stamina bars didn't start with Dark Souls. They've been in Monster Hunter forever, although a key distinction about Monster Hunter is that you only lose stamina when you dodge, run, or block. Attacking doesn't take any, which is significantly different from these games where it just kind of ends up feeling like a pace breaker. Khazan in particular is especially brutal. If you get hit when you're out of stamina, you go into a special exhausted state where you can't move at all until your stamina recovers. Whereas in Black Myth Wukong it's not quite as bad, but stamina recovery is notably slow. And I have to come back to this again, I don't understand why just running when you're not in combat takes stamina. Not even Elden Ring works like that. I don't know, when a game is leaning so heavily on action, I don't understand why they put in a system that's meant to bar you out of performing your actions, but also isn't meant to stay around because they want fights where you're supposed to dodge, deflect, block, whatever, multiple times in a row, and you can't do that with the amount of stamina they give you at base. If you want to make fights in your endgame where stamina management doesn't matter at all because the challenge is instead in how well the player can execute your combat, then I'd argue the stamina shouldn't be there in the first place. There are so many good action games where they don't use a stamina bar because the games are hard enough without them. Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, Sekiro even. None of them have a bar limiting how many actions you can do. It also just kind of ruins the power fantasy for me on a more meta level, where it feels really awkward when you're meant to be this super badass character and you're having to take a breather every 5 seconds of fighting. This isn't to say that stamina bars are a bad design. They're not. I think they're a little bit boring, due to the fact that the bar just passively increases. As much as you can talk about stamina management, you don't really actively manage anything, it just limits you. But in a slower paced combat setting especially, where dodging a few moves and then resetting is kind of how the game works, they make for a decent pacer that limits the player's ability to do big punishes. But in a non-stop action game, I don't know. This video came about because the entire time that I played through Black Myth Wukong, I was just kind of sitting there going, man, I wish I didn't have this stamina bar. It feels like it's here because they felt like they needed one, not because the gameplay actually required one. Most of the difficulty in that game comes from how difficult it can be to dodge the attacks, not from running out of stamina. So whenever you do run out of stamina, it's just this annoying feeling of like, ugh, let me interrupt the flow of the game for a second to just stand still and let this bar recharge. As Souls-likes seem to be leaning more and more into action, it just feels like an increasingly redundant feature. Even in Elden Ring, after a couple of levels, it's very difficult for most builds to run out of stamina. So much so that I would say Elden Ring is on the verge of not having stamina management in the first place. I'll just say one final time, they're not bad, but lately I feel like I keep seeing them in places where they don't make sense. Like, what's next? Am I gonna have to manage my stamina in a dating sim? Oh god.